Thomas and Emily were a picture-perfect couple on the surface. Living in a small, idyllic town surrounded by rolling hills and scenic beauty, they had managed to create a life that many would envy. Thomas worked as a mechanic, his hands always streaked with oil and grease, while Emily ran a modest bakery that smelled perpetually of freshly baked bread and sugary confections. Their home, though not extravagant, was warm and inviting, with a garden Emily meticulously tended every weekend. To outsiders, they were the epitome of contentment. They had been married for 8 years and shared 2 children, twins named Lily and James, both 6 years old. The children were their pride and joy, embodying the love they once felt so strongly for each other. Their laughter filled the house, creating a sense of life and vitality that compensated for the cracks beginning to show in their relationship. Thomas had noticed the changes gradually. Emily, once vibrant and endlessly affectionate, had become more distant. Her smile seemed forced, her laughter hollow. She spent longer hours at the bakery, often coming home well after the children were asleep. When asked about her tardiness, she would brush it off with a rehearsed excuse about new recipes or bookkeeping challenges. Thomas, though hurt, chose to believe her, attributing the growing gulf between them to the stresses of work and parenting. Their social status was modest. They weren't wealthy, but managed to live comfortably. Vacations were rare, limited to occasional trips to the nearby lake or a picnic in the hills. Yet, despite their financial constraints, they always made an effort to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries with a modest flair. Life was stable, predictable, and, in many ways, monotonous. Thomas, however, began to sense an undercurrent of unease. He started noticing things he hadn't paid attention to before: the lingering scent of a cologne he didn't own clinging to Emily's clothes, her sudden enthusiasm for dressing up more often, and the guarded look in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. These observations gnawed at him, planting the first seeds of suspicion. In the quiet hours of the night, as he lay awake in bed while Emily slept soundly beside him, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He replayed their interactions in his mind, searching for clues he might have missed. He wanted to believe in her, in the woman he had married, but his gut told him otherwise. Little did he know, his world was about to unravel in ways he could never have anticipated. The growing unease in my heart soon transformed into a restless curiosity that I could no longer suppress. It started innocuously, with me paying closer attention to Emily's routine. Every detail she shared about her day, every subtle shift in her demeanor, became something I scrutinized. I couldn't pinpoint when my suspicions began to take on a more tangible shape, but I knew that ignoring them was no longer an option. Emily's relationship with her brother, Daniel, had always been close. I initially found their bond endearing, even admirable. Daniel was younger by a few years, charming and quick-witted, with an easygoing manner that made him the life of any gathering. He had recently moved to our town, having secured a position as a landscape designer. His visits to our home were frequent and warmly welcomed by everyone, including the children, who adored their uncle. But as I observed more closely, I couldn't ignore a certain awkwardness that seemed to have crept into Daniel and Emily's interactions. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. A shared glance held a beat too long, a fleeting touch that lingered just beyond what felt natural. At first, I chastised myself for entertaining such dark thoughts. It was absurd, I reasoned, to suspect something so vile between siblings. Yet, the nagging voice in my head persisted. I began to notice patterns. Emily would often step out of the room to take phone calls, her voice hushed but animated. Daniel's visits seemed to coincide with moments when I was away or occupied. There was an undercurrent of secrecy in their behavior, and the more I tried to rationalize it, the more I felt the pieces falling into place in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. One evening, I decided to test my instincts. I pretended to leave for an errand, making sure to slam the door loudly as I exited. I parked my truck down the street, just out of sight, and waited. Minutes turned into an hour, and just as I began to doubt myself, I saw Daniel's car pull into the driveway. The sight triggered a cold wave of dread that settled in my chest like a stone. Unable to stay away, I crept back toward the house, moving with the cautious deliberation of a man who feared what he might find. Through the partially drawn curtains of our living room, I saw Emily and Daniel seated on the couch, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that seemed far too intimate for siblings. Daniel's hand rested on Emily's knee, and she made no effort to move it. My breath caught in my throat, my mind reeling with disbelief. I couldn't watch any longer. Retreating to my truck, I sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My thoughts were a chaotic storm of anger, betrayal, and confusion. Had I misinterpreted what I saw? Was my mind playing tricks on me? The possibility that I was right filled me with a rage that threatened to consume me. Yet, I resolved to gather more evidence before confronting either of them. The truth, as unbearable as it might be, was something I needed to face head-on. The following days were a haze of paranoia and heightened awareness. I felt like an outsider in my own life, watching everything unfold from a distance. Emily continued her routine as if nothing had changed, her demeanor as cheerful and composed as ever. Daniel, too, maintained his usual charm and camaraderie. But to me, Every word he spoke, every smile he flashed, felt like a calculated mockery. The betrayal I suspected gnawed at my insides, and I knew I needed something definitive. I decided to track Emily's movements. It wasn't an easy decision. The act of spying on someone I had once trusted completely filled me with guilt and shame. Yet, the weight of doubt was heavier, and I couldn't carry it any longer. One evening, after Emily announced she had to stay late at the bakery to prepare for a large order, I followed her. Keeping a safe distance, I trailed her car through the familiar streets of our town until she took a turn that didn't lead to the bakery. My heart pounded as I realized she was heading toward the park on the outskirts of town. The park was a secluded area, bordered by dense woods and rarely visited at night. I parked my truck a short distance away and continued on foot, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. The crisp night air bit at my skin, but I hardly noticed. My focus was solely on Emily. She parked near the edge of the park, where the trees cast long, dark shadows over the grass. I watched as she stepped out of the car and walked toward a figure waiting under one of the tall oaks. Even from a distance, I recognized Daniel. He emerged from the shadows, and they embraced, not the casual hug of siblings, but something far more intimate. My chest tightened as I struggled to breathe, my worst fears materializing before my eyes. They moved to a bench beneath the tree, their heads close together as they talked. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language spoke volumes. Daniel reached out to brush a strand of hair from Emily's face, and she leaned into his touch, her expression soft and tender. It was a look I hadn't seen on her face in years, a look that once had been reserved for me. I felt a surge of anger so intense it almost blinded me. My fist clenched, and I fought the urge to storm over and confront them. But some part of me held back, knowing that a scene here, in the dark of the park, would solve nothing. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a series of photos, each click of the shutter feeling like a stab to my heart. I needed proof, tangible evidence to confirm what I already knew. When I returned to my truck, I sat in silence, the weight of what I had witnessed pressing down on me. I stared at the photos, each one a stark reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. I had the truth now, undeniable and cruel, but what would I do with it? Confronting Emily was inevitable, but I needed to think, to plan. My emotions were too raw, my mind too clouded by rage and sorrow. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't face her. Not yet. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the photos burning a hole in my pocket and the image of Emily and Daniel seared into my memory. The betrayal felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, and I knew that no matter what I did next, nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed were a haze of seething rage and cold calculation. I couldn't unsee the images burned into my mind, nor could I ignore the betrayal that had upended my world. Confronting Emily outright felt too simple. It demanded more than just words. The anger bubbling within me demanded retribution. The first step was gathering more evidence. I needed every detail laid bare. Over the next few days, I monitored their movements with precision. I hacked into Emily's phone, uncovering a string of text messages. The words were brazen and intimate. I printed everything, creating a dossier of their betrayal. With each discovery, my fury deepened. My rage was a fire that refused to be quenched. I began to fantasize about making them pay. Exposing their affair publicly became my focus. This wasn't just about Emily and Daniel. It was about the life they had stolen from me. The trust, the love, the family we had built was gone. They needed to face the consequences. An opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. Our town was small and news traveled fast. A community event was scheduled for the weekend. Emily had helped organize the fundraiser. It was the perfect stage. Everyone who mattered would be there. Friends, neighbors, and even Daniel's colleagues would attend. I envisioned the looks on their faces as their secret was revealed. I spent the next few days preparing. I created a slideshow from the photos I had taken. Screenshots of their incriminating messages accompanied the images. The presentation was damp. I rehearsed what I would say. My words would land like a hammer blow. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. The night of the event arrived. The air buzzed with anticipation. The community center was packed. The mood was festive and lighthearted. Emily moved through the crowd with effortless charm. She was oblivious to the storm about to break. Daniel was there too, his presence a thorn at my side. I waited until the speeches began. My moment came, and I stepped onto the stage. I thanked everyone for their support and participation. My voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Then, without preamble, I announced I had something important to share. The room grew quiet. My words drew everyone in. I projected the first image onto the screen. It was a photo of Emily and Daniel in the park. Their embrace was unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs of shock and disbelief followed. I didn't stop. One by one, I unveiled the evidence. Each slide cut deeper into their facade. By the time I reached the text messages, the room was a cacophony. Whispers and stifled cries filled the air. Emily's face was a mask of horror. Her composure crumbled with each passing second. Daniel stood frozen. His usual charm was replaced by stunned silence. I looked directly at them. My voice was steady as I delivered my final words. This is what betrayal looks like. This is what it does. I left the stage without waiting for a response. The damage was done. I felt a grim satisfaction as I walked out into the night. The crowd's reaction was a distant hum. The weight of my actions settled over me like a heavy cloak. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of relief. The truth was out. While it wouldn't heal the wounds they inflicted, it was a start. The game was far from over. But for now, I allowed myself to breathe. The fallout from the public revelation was immediate and chaotic. I had expected whispers, maybe anger, but the scale of the reaction was far greater. Emily's perfect facade crumbled. Friends turned their backs. Whispers of disgust followed her wherever she went, and her once pristine reputation was left in tatters. Daniel fared no better. His colleagues and acquaintances recoiled, his charm rendered meaningless in the face of such disgrace. The community's condemnation was swift and merciless, and for a brief moment, I felt vindicated, but the satisfaction was fleeting. The aftermath of my actions left a void I hadn't anticipated. My home, once filled with the warmth of family, now felt cold and empty. The children sensed the tension, their laughter replaced by silence. Emily avoided me, her gaze filled with a mixture of guilt and resentment. Yet, despite everything, she stayed, perhaps out of obligation, perhaps out of defiance. I couldn't tell anymore. I knew that exposing the truth had been only the first step. My anger still burned, but now it was tempered by an aching sadness that seemed impossible to shake. I began to plan my next move, something that would leave a lasting mark. It wasn't enough for them to suffer the consequences. They needed to understand the depth of the pain they had caused. I wanted them to feel as broken as I did. I started with Daniel. He had been reckless enough to mix personal and professional lives, and that made him vulnerable. Through a contact at his workplace, I learned about his upcoming project, a high-profile landscaping contract that could make or break his career. It didn't take much to sow doubt among his clients. Anonymous emails, carefully worded and supported by the evidence I had gathered, painted a picture of a man whose personal scandals overshadowed his professionalism. By the time the rumors reached his employers, the damage was done. The project was pulled, and Daniel was left scrambling to salvage his reputation. Watching him flounder gave me a grim satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. Emily, too, needed to face the consequences of her actions. Her bakery, once a beloved cornerstone of the community, began to suffer as word of the affair spread. Customers stopped coming, and online reviews turned venomous. I didn't need to lift a finger. The community's judgment was punishment enough. Yet, it brought me no peace. As the weeks turned into months, the toll of my revenge became apparent. Emily grew more withdrawn, her once vibrant personality dulled by the weight of shame and isolation. The children, caught in the crossfire of our fractured relationship, became quieter, their eyes filled with questions I couldn't answer. I began to question whether my actions had been worth it. In my quest for vengeance, I had destroyed more than just Em and Daniel. I had destroyed myself. One evening, as I sat alone in the empty house, I came across the dossier I had compiled. The photos, the messages, the evidence of their betrayal, all of it felt like relics from another life. I realized that I had been clinging to my anger, using it as a shield against the pain of loss. But the shield had become a prison, trapping me in a cycle of bitterness that offered no escape. I made a decision that night. I gathered everything, the photos, the printed messages, even the digital files, and burned them. The flames consumed the evidence, their glow illuminated the darkness around me. As the ashes settled, I felt a strange sense of relief. Letting go of the evidence felt like letting go of the pain, if only a little. In the days that followed, I began to rebuild, not just my life but also myself. I sought therapy, something I had once scoffed at, and found it to be a place where I could confront my pain without judgment. I started spending more time with the children, trying to restore the joy that had been lost. Emily and I remained distant, but for the sake of the family, we found a way to coexist. As for Daniel, I heard through the grapevine that he had moved away, seeking a fresh start elsewhere. I didn't care to know more. He was a chapter one was ready to close. Emily, too, seemed to change. She became more subdued, more reflective. Whether it was guilt, regret, or something else entirely, I couldn't say. We didn't speak about what had happened, but there was an unspoken understanding that things could never return to what they'd been. The road to healing was long and uneven, marked by setbacks and small victories. I learned to find solace in the little things, a quiet evening with the children, a moment of laughter that felt genuine, the slow but steady return of hope. My anger no longer defined me, and while the scars of betrayal remained, they became a part of me rather than a burden. In the end, I realized that revenge had given me no closure, only more pain. Forgiveness, not for Emily or Daniel, but for myself, was the only way forward. Letting go of the past was not easy, but it was necessary. And so, I took one step at a time, moving toward a future where I could finally find peace. The weeks after the flames consumed the physical remnants of my revenge brought an eerie calm. I thought I had left everything behind. Yet, something gnawed at the edges of my mind, a persistent feeling that the story wasn't over. It was a chance encounter on a gray, windless afternoon that shattered my illusion of closure. The park, the same one that had been the backdrop for their betrayal, was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves. I had started taking walks there again, trying to reclaim it for myself. On this day, a figure I hadn't seen in months emerged from the shadows of memory. Daniel. He was alone, sitting on the same bench where I had first caught them. The shoulders were hunched, his face drawn as if the weight of the world had finally caught up to him. I should have walked away. Instead, I approached, curiosity overriding my better judgment. He noticed me before I reached him, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Regret? Whatever it was, he didn't flee. Instead, he motioned for me to sit. Against my better instincts, I did. We sat in silence for a long moment, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "I need to tell you something," he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. What followed turned everything I thought I knew on its head. Daniel wasn't just complicit in the betrayal. He claimed he had been manipulated. Emily, he said, had orchestrated the affair not out of passion but out of a calculated desire to punish me. For what? My heart pounded as he revealed the truth. Years ago, before our marriage, Emily had discovered something I had buried deep, a fleeting, ill-conceived dalliance with someone she knew. I had dismissed it as a meaningless mistake, something I thought would never surface. But she had found out and carried that knowledge like a blade, waiting for the right moment to wield it. Daniel's role in the affair wasn't born of love or lust, he claimed, but of guilt. Emily had confided in him, twisted their friendship into something darker. She had painted herself as a victim of my betrayal, convincing him that their actions were a form of justice. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said, his voice breaking. But once it started, I couldn't stop. I didn't know whether to believe it. Part of me wanted to dismiss his words as a desperate attempt to absolve himself. But another part, the part that knew Emily's capacity for control and manipulation, couldn't ignore the possibility. If what he said was true, then everything I had done, every ounce of pain I had inflicted, was based on a lie. I left the park that day with my mind in turmoil. Memories of Emily began to shift and warp under the weight of Daniel's confession. I started noticing patterns I had once ignored, small, seemingly insignificant moments that now took on a sinister light. The way she had always deflected when the topic of fidelity came up. The subtle ways she had undermined my confidence over the years. The sense that I had been playing a role in a script I hadn't written. I confronted Emily that evening, armed with Daniel's words and my own doubts. She didn't deny it. Instead, she met my accusations with a cold, bitter smile. "You always thought you were the wronged one," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "But you were never as innocent as you pretended to be." Her admission shattered what little remained of my image of her, but it also freed me in a way I hadn't expected. The truth, as painful as it was, stripped away the last vestiges of illusion. For the first time, I saw Emily not as the woman I had loved, nor as the enemy I had vilified, but as a deeply flawed human being. And in seeing her that way, I found the strength to let go. The final step in my journey wasn't revenge or even forgiveness. It was indifference. Emily moved out shortly after our confrontation, taking with her the remnants of a life we had once shared. I didn't look back. Daniel, too, faded from my life, his role in the drama nothing more than a footnote. The park remained. It became a symbol not of betrayal but of resilience. I continued to walk there, each step a reminder that life goes on, no matter how deep the wounds. And as the seasons changed, so did I. The anger and pain that had consumed me were replaced by a quiet determination to live, not in spite of what had happened, but because of it. The past couldn't be undone, but the future was mine to shape. And with each passing day, I took another step forward, leaving the shadows of betrayal behind. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.